प्रदीपः ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवती अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्बा त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्स सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्याग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोतीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तक केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा संबोधना बोधितं लोके सज्जन षट्पदैरहरः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् भारत पंकजं थलिमल प्रध्वांसिन श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्त्वैः वेदैः साङ्गपदं क्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगा ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
My humble greetings and salutations to one and all. It is indeed my pleasure, on behalf of the Life Mastery Foundation, to welcome you to this, the seventh day of our Gita Week discourses. The past week has been a journey in understanding the vision of the Bhagavad Gita. Each day has taught us a new lesson, given us a deeper and more practical understanding and interpretation of the text, but most importantly, showed us how we can apply these in our daily lives. The message that stood out for me yesterday on the power of devotion was how true devotion can change your mood, your thinking, your attitude, transforming your mindset. So when we make decisions, it is to do the right thing. And doing the right thing makes you a better person, which ultimately positively impacts your family and society at large. Today's discourse is based on knowledge is power. And without further ado, I welcome and hand you over to our Guru and spiritual master, Sri M.K. Angajanji.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastoma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Greetings and salutations to one and all of you. Akbar was a Mughal ruler, ruled India during the 15th century. Akbar had a very wise, witty minister. His name was Birbal. Akbar wanted a court painter, not an ordinary court painter, but a wise one, someone very unique, not just the painting talent alone. So he told Birbal about his interest. So Birbal announced Akbar's need. So he had received a lot of CVs or applications from many talented painters. Finally, Birbal shortlisted two painters, two artists, And they were given 1 week's time to display their skill, their ability, their wisdom. So Birbal gave them 2 granite walls to paint on. And they were given 1 week's time to accomplish. So both the painters got on to their job. And it so happened that the granite walls were facing each other, and in the middle there was a curtain, so that the painters could not see each other's painting. That was the intention of the curtain in between. So both the painters got on to their job. After 1 week, it was the time for Birbal to invite Akbar, the king, to check and choose for himself which painter he wanted. So when Akbar came and he unveiled the painting of one of the painter, let's say the first painter, the first artist, and Akbar was so amazed to see the quality of painting. Akbar was more than happy to see the painting and choose the artist, the painter, as his court painter. But he had to see the work of the other painter also, because it's a competition, as it were. So he decided to unveil the painting of the second painter. And when Akbar unveiled the second painter, he was even more amazed to see what the second painter had painted. What did the second painter paint? He painted exactly what the first painter painted. And of course, after the painting is over, they have removed the curtain and they trusted the painters, and they did not copy each other, what each other painted. They made sure that. So the second painter also painted exactly what the first painter painted. But what is unique is that the second painter painted almost a 3D. The second painter went inside the granite stone and painted as it were. Something unique. Now you may wonder, how did the second painter accomplish that, painting exactly what the first painter painted? While the first painter went and got all sorts of painting material, the best quality paint, the best quality brush, the best quality, you name it, whatever that was needed. While the first painter got so busy painting and the best quality paint, the second painter did not paint anything. What did then he do? He went and got all kinds of abrasive material. He started polishing the granite wall. He spent the entire week polishing the granite wall and made it so bright and brilliant, and he made it look like a mirror. When he spent the whole week polishing the granite wall and he made it look like a mirror, whatever the first painter painted reflected in that. That is how the second painter accomplished the task. Now, ladies and gentlemen, The topic today is knowledge is power. Or you want to call it the power of knowledge. Now, what is true knowledge? The true knowledge is, as espoused in the Bhagavad Gita, is totally different from what most people understand true knowledge is. Today, most people have an uncontrollable craving for knowledge. They go on cramming information. They read volumes and volumes of literatures with an idea of accumulating knowledge. But all those knowledge that you cram from institutions and universities, even in religious institutions, through the study of the Vedanta, the spiritual literatures, all those knowledge are false knowledge. So says Bhagavan Sri Krishna. I will draw your attention to what Krishna says. Now, the message of the story that I just told you is that while the first painter got so busy painting, the second painter did not paint anything. What did he do? He polished. Similarly, you can either go on cramming information from the world, or you can work on purifying yourself. Make your mind pure, your intellect clear. When we put an effort in purifying our mind and clarifying your intellect, all the knowledge that we want to gain from the world, we will discover that it is within each one of us. Our own self is the source of infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite wisdom, infinite bliss. Yes, all these terms that I've used, infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite wisdom, it may not make any sense to us. It may be all Greek and Latin to us, assuming we don't know what the Greek and Latin. But then, when we don't understand, that is when we work towards purifying the knowledge. Just as the second painter spent the whole week purifying or shining the granite stone, similarly, the true knowledge gets reflected within each one of us when we work towards purifying our personality. That is why some of the great sages and saints, in recent times as well as ancient times, they spent decades together purifying their personality. Of course, they made use of all the spiritual knowledge. They meditated, they went through a lot of sadhana, and they found, although many of them did not go through a lot of formal education, they gave out profound wisdom. How did they do that? By purifying oneself. Today, we are caught up in the vicious cycle of changing the world by gaining more and more knowledge. Mere accumulation of knowledge will not change the world, will not change yourself. We got to learn the lesson. By changing yourself, we can reflect the knowledge from the world outside. The knowledge of Vedanta, when we gradually, systematically reflect upon, it changes our life. We don't have to worry changing the world. Today, all the knowledges that we gain from the schools, universities, or any educational institutions for that matter, it is only about the knowledge of the world outside. An average human being goes through about 15 to 17 years of learning. all those learning that we gain from schools and institutions, you can go to some of the best universities in the world, Ivy League universities. All they provide is the knowledge of the world outside. That will not help us to change our life. That will not help us to change, to find happiness, unless you find another knowledge that is called Atma Vidya, that is knowledge of the self. Yes, by all means, you gain the knowledge from the world. You gain knowledge from some of the best universities in the world if you can. Nothing wrong with it. But what is wrong is that if we believe only gaining those knowledge will find us happiness, that is mistaken. The knowledge of Vedanta, the spiritual knowledge, helps us to bring about a self-transformation. When you bring about transformation, you will find you will reflect that knowledge in every other areas. When you transform yourself, you will find every areas it will reflect. This knowledge of Vedanta, it makes you better in every aspect of life. If you are a father, it will make you a better father. If you are a son or daughter, it will make you a better daughter. You are able to play the role of a daughter or a son, the better. If you're a mother, it makes you a better mother. If you're a doctor, it will make you a better doctor. If you're an architect, it will make you a better architect. If you're a student, it will make you a better student. If you're a housewife, homemaker, it will make you a better homemaker. It will make you better in every aspect. That is the impact of this knowledge. But ignoring this knowledge, you can have the best of knowledge. There are so many examples. There are so many case studies that you can take. Some of the people are so brilliant, brilliant doctors, brilliant engineers, brilliant mathematicians, brilliant scientists. They have all the brilliance as far as their field of activities are concerned, but look at many of their personal life. I'm sure many of you listening there have come across specialists who are expert in their field of activity, but their personal life is miserable. Their marriage is in a deplorable condition. Their relationship with the children is terrible. As an employer, his relationship with the employees are not really favorable. Why? Because they have the knowledge of the world, but they have not focused upon Atma Vidya, that is the knowledge of oneself. Now we have to learn this lesson in this period, what the world is going through. If this COVID-19, the advent of COVID-19 doesn't teach us a lesson, I don't know what will really teach us a lesson. For centuries, for several centuries, we have been focusing upon changing the world. Economists, politicians, and scientists for decades together, they've done a fantastic job in changing the world, and they continue to change the world. They made a mess of it, actually. They have developed technology so much beyond what human beings need. Yes, technological advancement is fantastic, but we do not know how to use the technology rightly. That is why Einstein said, I fear the day when technology overpowered the human interaction, the world will have a generation of idiots. That's what Einstein said. And that is the day it has come already. Because we have depended so much upon technology that scientists have contributed and ignored the most important technology, that is the science of the self, science of the soul, the knowledge of Vedanta empowers us with the science of the soul. And once you learn the science of the soul, you can relate to the world properly, in any relationship for that matter. So our problem is ignorance of our own engineering. Ladies and gentlemen, if you walk into a room that is pitch dark, and assuming there are a lot of furnitures and fittings lying around, and being it pitch dark, you are sure to knock on the furnitures and fittings that is inside the room. And you rearrange the furnitures in the pitch dark. You can rearrange the furnitures. Next time when you walk into the room again, you will get knocked down. Corners and cornices and fittings, furnitures. You can rearrange the room any number of times, you will get knocked down. But what our Shastras, what Bhagavad Gita says is that leave the fittings and furniture as it is. All that you need to do is light a matchstick, light a candle with a matchstick. That's all that you need to do. And that candle will give you enough light to steer yourself in the room. You don't have to rearrange. When you develop that wisdom, you will know exactly to steer yourself. But what are we doing? We go on rearranging and manipulating the world. The problem is that we believe we are more intelligent than nature. And out of sheer arrogance, we have meddled with, we have interfered with the intelligence of nature. And when we take on that arrogance, that we are more intelligent than nature, that is when the nature will teach us the lesson. There will be advent of situations like this. Instead, yes, change the world where you can, but then to believe that only changing of the world that is necessary, that is living with utter ignorance. So when we assimilate this knowledge, that is when it brings about a self-transformation. Thereafter, your perception of knowledge changes. That is what Krishna calls elsewhere Jnana Chakshu, that is the eye of wisdom. When you gain the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of any Shastras, knowledge of any scriptures, not randomly. Some people have a tendency to randomly read books here and there. That doesn't help. You need to engage a systematic scientific presentation. You got to invest every day 45 minutes to assimilate certain amount of wisdom, certain amount of knowledge. And when you do that, the wisdom crystallizes. And when the wisdom crystallizes in your personality, in your mind, the Jnana Chakshu opens, the eye of wisdom opens. Now, what does it mean by eye of wisdom or Jnana Chakshu opening? Your perspective changes. At the moment when you are unhappy in your marriage, you believe the problem is with your partner, you're with your spouse. But when you understand this knowledge, you begin to realize there is something that I'm not doing right. You begin the change with yourself. This is called paradigm shift. What is this paradigm shift? Let me explain to you with an analogy, with a story. Once, there was a family of three. They were traveling from London to one of the neighboring cities by train many decades ago. As they were traveling, and there were many passengers sitting around, some of them were reading. And as they were traveling, This family of three, the son, the father and mother, the boy was about 22 years old. He was occupying the window seat. As he was sitting there and train is moving, he was looking outside the window. And as he's looking outside, he was getting excited by seeing that he saw everything outside. As he see vehicles moving around outside, he was getting excited. And he would draw the mother's attention and say, "Mommy, mommy, look at the vehicles moving, look at the cars moving." And as you know, when the train is moving forward, everything outside moves behind. So he experiences that visual illusion. Far away, all the trees and everything moving behind. And he was so fascinated by this sight. And he was drawing the parents' attention. "Mommy, look at those, look at the car, look at the bus, look at the trees." This was a positive disturbance, positive annoyance for the fellow passengers. And other passengers tolerated this for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. After 15 minutes or so, one of the fellow passengers got the father's attention. And he said, "Excuse me, sir, can you see your son's behavior? Why does he behave like this? I think there is something wrong with his brain. You need to take him to a doctor, to a psychiatrist." He was very annoyed. And the father was very calm and composed. And the father responded to the man and said, "Sir, we are just coming from the hospital. My son was born blind. Somebody donated him 2 eyes. He's seeing the world for the very first time." As soon as the other people heard the fact that the boy is seeing the world for the very first time, immediately something happened in their mind. Immediately they began to look at the boy with the spirit of compassion, with a renewed sense of attitude, a renewed perspective. Before they knew the fact why the boy was behaving, they experienced annoyance, they experienced irritation, they were upset. But having known why the boy was behaving like this, their perception changed. Now, did the boy's behavior change? No. The boy continued to behave the way he was behaving, oblivious of the fact what was happening around. He was very excited because he's experiencing all this for the very first time. He's seeing all this for the very first time, having lived for 20 years or a life of darkness. When they received the knowledge, the paradigm shifted. They begin to look at the world with a renewed perspective, with a sense of compassion. This, ladies and gentlemen, is called paradigm shift. In our ancient wisdom, they called it jnana chakshu, the eye of wisdom. So what happens is, when you gradually, bit by bit, systematically assimilate this knowledge, what happens is, sometimes without you knowing, the wisdom gets crystallized. When the wisdom gets crystallized, what happens is your perspective changes. Without that change of perspective, you can change the world. Nothing will happen. You can change your name. You can change your address. You can change your country. You can change your spouse. You can change your car. You can change your clothes. But if your mindset doesn't change, nothing will change outside. If your attitude, if your perspectives don't change, all those changes means nothing. Today, there are so many people believe that, okay, I have a problem with my spouse, let me change my partner. You can change your wife, you can change your husband, your life will not change unless your thinking changes. There are so many people try to change their spouses. Some people have changed their spouse 7-8 times. Elizabeth Taylor, as you know, the film actress. married about 8 times, that she didn't find happiness. And there are so many people in the society believe that there is something wrong with my spouse, so say, let me change my husband or wife, I'll find happiness. Nobody in the world found a better partner by changing the person. But those people who found happiness in relationship is by changing their thinking, changing their perspective, changing their attitude and reactions and expectation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of knowledge. It brings about a shift in the paradigm. But at the moment, we are so deeply rooted in that belief that we need undue level of information. Because we believe that we need so much of the knowledge of the world outside, we put our children under undue pressure for academic performance. Remember, those people who performed brilliantly academically are not necessarily the happy people in the world. They are not necessarily the most successful people in the world. In fact, truth is contrary. Some of the most successful people, some of the CEOs of the world today, corporations of world today, are not necessarily people with academic brilliance, but people who brought about a change within. Yes, if children have the ability to perform academically, by all means, they need to. But not everybody has the ability, every children in the world have got the ability to score 80, 90 or 95. Some people may score 40 or 50, but they may have the ability to change oneself. And those people can impact in the world greatly. We put our children excessive pressure for academic performance. And what do? We ignore their hidden talent, which Bhagavad Gita calls Swadharma, which we discussed the other day. Why do we ignore their hidden talent in the name of gaining academic performance, cramming information? Encourage them to enhance their hidden talent. You will find them great achievers. You will find them being happy. So therefore, true knowledge is not bookish knowledge. True knowledge is not erudition or scholarship. True knowledge is inner transformation. Let us now see what Bhagavan Krishna says in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, describing what is true knowledge. What is true jnanam? The Sanskrit word for knowledge is jnanam. There is jnanam, then there is vijnanam. Jnanam is information, vijnanam is wisdom. So when you realize what Krishna is saying, our perspective should change. Verse 8 of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
Amanittvamadavidvam ahimsa kshantirājavam acāryopasanam shaucham stairyamaatmavinigraha.
True knowledge, he says, amanitvam, absence of pride, unpretentiousness, not being pretending, harmlessness, ahimsa, non-injury, forgiveness, uprightness, being straightforward, service of the preceptor, serving the teacher, serving the guru, purity, steadfastness, self-control. The 8th verse of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita gives us about 10 qualities of a person of knowledge. Humility, unpretentiousness, harmlessness, forgiveness, uprightness, service of the preceptor, purity, steadfastness, and self-control. I'm not going to go through the explanation of these verses because we really cannot do justice. But one day we will do that. And then he continues in the next verse, that is the 9th verse.
Indriyateshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadihi dukkha doshanudarshanam.
The 9th verse talks about another few qualities of a man of wisdom. He says, dispassion towards sense objects, with reference to worldly pleasures, a sense of disinterest, dispassion. Absence of egoism, not being egoistic. Perception of the pain and evil of birth, disease, old age, and death. We need to understand life has a lot of pain. It's not only pleasure. We need to look at both sides. All right. He gives us another 3 qualities here of a man of wisdom. Verse 10.
Asaktirana bishwangaha putradhara grihadishu nityam cha samachittatvam ishthanishtopapartishu.
The 10th verse of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita gives another some of the qualification of true knowledge. He says, asakta, non-attachment, non-infatuation with son, wife, or home, and constant balance of mind in desirable and undesirable happening. A man of knowledge is not about erudition and scholarship. It is about the ability to maintain a mental balance in favorable and unfavorable circumstances. One who is not obsessive, one who is not attached to his possessions. That is a man of knowledge. And then 11th verse.
Mai chananya yogena bhaktiravya vicharini vivikta desha sevitvam aratir jana sansadi.
The 11th verse of the 13th chapter, he reads, unswerving devotion to me by steadfast yoga, an unflinching devotion to Krishna, or the God of your understanding, resorting to solitary place, a person who's able to live in silence. Today, we are not able to live in isolation. We want all kinds of gadgets and gizmos and people around. Distaste for crowd of people, meaning that there are people who constantly, they need people around. If they are all alone, they cannot find happiness. Remember, when you're all by yourself, who keeps your company? Yourself, isn't it? So if you don't like your own company, who's at fault? Yourself. And then in the 12th verse,
Ajnanam jnana nityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam etad jnanamiti proktam ajnanam yadato nyatha.
and then he says, constancy in self-knowledge, consistency in gaining knowledge of your own self, your self-dynamics, perception of the end of true knowledge. It is not a casual reading of literature, but you go to the end of it until that information becomes wisdom. And then he says, mark this word carefully, he says, etat jnanam iti proktam. This is declared to be knowledge, and what is opposed to it is ignorance. Etat jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yadadonyatha. This is knowledge. What is this knowledge? This is, in Vedantic parlance, these few verses that we read out is what we generally refer to in Vedantic parlance as 20 qualities of a person of knowledge. 20 qualities of a person of knowledge. One day we will study that. That's why we suggest that you keep yourself updated with our social media, including Instagram, and the other social media, of course, WhatsApp. So we will be announcing our programs in the future. We'll be studying this text, this particular section, some day or the other. So you'll be informed, and a lot of these are free of cost, of course. So keep yourself updated with the social media, including YouTube. So before you leave, subscribe to this channel. Now, these are declared to be knowledge. So where is this, what Lord Krishna described, and what do we understand knowledge? It is not just mechanical information that we gain. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we go through 3 phases of ignorance. We go through 3 phases of ignorance, all right? The 3 phases of ignorance that we go through are, number 1, I don't know. All right? A lot of us have ignorance. We don't know. So some of you may not really understand the practical knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. Some of you may say, well, oh, I never knew that Bhagavad Gita is so practical. It is indeed very, very practical. So if you are hearing about these talks for the first time, you might say, well, now I know. But then you have the second phase of ignorance. The second phase of ignorance is, I don't understand. I know, but I don't understand. Then you have the third phase of ignorance. I understand, but I am not able to practice it. The problem today is that most of us spend many hours reading volumes and volumes and volumes of literatures. Or you may go and listen to any number of speakers, gurus, swamis, mahatmas. All those listening will not come to your aid unless you engage in the second practice that is called manana. Remember, the first phase of ignorance, I don't know, can be overcome by listening. A lot of us believe that, okay, if I go and listen to Ankajanji's talk, I will transform myself. Nothing will happen. You will come out of the same door that you walked in. Yes, you have to listen to these talks, of course, but then you got to engage in the second practice in order to remove the second phase of ignorance, that is, I don't understand. To understand this knowledge thoroughly, you got to practice manana, that is called reflection. You got to think over it again, think over this knowledge again and again. Having received, you apply the question, why is it? What is it? How is it? That is called manana, reflection. Having reflected upon this, the third phase of ignorance is, yes, I seem to understand now, but I'm not able to practice it. I'm not changing myself. What's happening? There's no transformation. I'm still going through same anxiety, same anger, same relationship challenges, etc. Why? Because you're not reflecting enough, nor are you experimenting and practicing it. So the third phase of ignorance, I can't experience, I'm not able to practice, that comes when you actually meditate in life. It's called a nididhyasana. But instead of assimilating knowledge, what do people do? Today, when it comes to self-development, when it comes to spiritual development, the real problem is our ignorance. But there is a lot of belief systems floating around without gaining the knowledge. You know, once there was a society of savages, the story. Once there was a society of savages in a cave somewhere in Himalayas. They have been living there for generations together. Many, many generations. All that they knew was sunlight. You know, when the sun rises, they all wake up. As the sun sets, they go to sleep. And they lived there for many generations. And they survive on fish. That's it. And they lived together. And they believed that there is a demon, a Rakshasa called Andhera. Andhera in Sanskrit means darkness. In Hindi, in other vernacular also, it means darkness. Demon of darkness were living around in an unexplored cave nearby. A demon called darkness living in a cave, and many of their ancestors were eaten up by this demon called darkness. And some of them went inside the cave, never returned. So they believed that the demon called darkness consumed, eaten them up. And they went on with these generations. And some of them said, in order to overcome this darkness, you must approach the demon in a worshipful mood, in a prayerful mood. And they started praying. The demon of darkness, nothing happened to him. They went on for many of them prayed, nothing happened. And some other people recommended you must take certain vows, fasting, etc. And many of them went through fasting. Nothing happened to the darkness, the demon called darkness. They went on. Another set of people, you must distribute alms, charity. Practice charity. Then you can overpower the demon called darkness. And they went on giving dhanam, nothing happened. Another people advise you must do deep breathing. Take a deep breath, and as you breathe, smile and breathe out. And many of them went on breathing for years and years and years, nothing happened. Another people came and said, you must do yoga, stretch taut, stretch deep. And then went on stretching, nothing happened. Still, Rakshasa, the demon, remained. Finally, a person came and they understood the helplessness of those people and said, believe me, let me see if I can help you. Can you bring some dry grass and a couple of long bamboo sticks? And what this man did is that he got some flint and stone, and he struck the stone with the flint and created fire, and he made torches with the dry grass. And he created the savages never seen fire before, and he created the fire and he lit torches for each one of them and said, take this equipment and go inside that cave. And go inside the cave and you can hold the demon called darkness and come out if you can find them. So having created the torches, and he distributed the torches to each one of them and said, with this torch you walk into the cave and see you can catch hold of that demon and come out. And some people did not believe him. Many of them were suspicious. How this man talking about is nonsense. Many of us have lived, many of our ancestors have lived here. None of them could transform that. How can this? See, the problem is when you express facts blatantly, sometimes it comes across as criticism. When we express our facts so blatantly, you think it is criticism, but the truth is that you can do worship, you can do fast, you can do pranayama, you can do yoga, you can distribute alms. While all those things are, of course, very relevant religious practices, no doubt, all that is kindergarten practices. Rituals have a role to play in our spiritual sadhana. Yoga and pranayama plays an important role. Religious vows plays an important role. Charity, dhanam, plays an important role. But all those practices are simply a preparation to ultimately gain the knowledge of the Shastras. Without light, you cannot overcome the darkness. So that demon of darkness is our own ignorance. While all these religious practices are a stepping stone, a lot of people enter into the kindergarten and they stay put in the kindergarten. For decades together, for 30, 40, 50 years, they have been performing the rituals after rituals after rituals. Nothing is happening to them. Rituals are entry point. It's a kindergarten. And having started off with the rituals and religious practices, we need to advance to practice other literature. Hinduism is so ingeniously structured with the 4 pillars of Hinduism, which includes the philosophy contained in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, and Brahma Sutra. This is called Prasthanatrayas, the essence of Hindu religion, universal religion. And then you have the epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, which actually demonstrates the wisdom that is described in the Upanishads are so practical. Ramayana and Mahabharata are demonstrative Shastra. It demonstrates to you. And then you have Puranas. Not everybody is capable of intellectually tuning to the terse philosophy of the Upanishads. So they gave out Puranas, long, windy layers and layers of stories, 18 Puranas. And each Purana runs into thousands of verses. The shortest Purana is about 9,000 verses, and the longest Purana is Kanda Purana, containing 81,000 verses. Those 81,000 verses are simply conveying the same philosophy that is contained in the Upanishad, that runs in probably 15, 20, about 800 verses. And finally, at the lowest rung of the level is the rituals. So when we continuously practice only rituals and prayers and don't go into studying the literatures, you are simply staying put in the kindergarten all your lifetime. Yes, join the kindergarten, but graduate. This is the paradox. So when philosophers come and talk to you that don't get fanatically attached the rituals, it might, and we put it blatantly, we don't really sugarcoat our message. It will sound like criticism. So you got to overcome the three phases of ignorance. And that comes through reflection. That is why Shastras talks about Viveka and Vairagya. Viveka means knowledge. Vairagya means detachment, abstinence. If you really want to assimilate this wisdom and bring it into your practical life, all right, you got to engage in two practices. That is what Bhagavad Gita calls it, Viveka and Vairagya. Viveka is knowledge, thinking, reasoning, discrimination. Discrimination, not in the sense of discrimination of races. Discrimination means thinking ability, discriminating between right and wrong. Having understood what is right, you got to abstain from what is wrong. Slowly, but gradually. So this Viveka and Vairagya is like the two wings to fly to the height of spiritual perfection. So when you assimilate, you'll find the paradigm shifts. Another set of people think that knowledge is about remembering the information. Knowledge is all about memory. A lot of people try to memorize the verses. Knowledge is not remembering the literature. In fact, true knowledge is forgetfulness. Yes, I mean it, you heard it right. True knowledge is forgetfulness. What is good memory? How do we define good memory? Who is a person who has got a good memory? Today, we believe a person who can remember so many of his past, even bad experiences, has got a good memory. Far from the truth, ladies and gentlemen. A true memory, write it down. Let this be etched in your memory. What is good memory? Good memory is that which is trained to forget the trivial. Good memory is that which is trained to forget the trivial. If you are carrying a lot of trivial aspects of life, which has happened 10 years, 20 years before, and if you're still carrying those in your mind, you have a terrible memory. You have a very bad memory. When you assimilate a little bit of this information, what happens is you begin to overlook the harm the other people have done to you. That is why those verses that I read out, one of the quality of a person of knowledge is forgiveness. Chami. Chama is a Sanskrit word which means forgiveness. There are people who keep remembering the trivial things. Somebody borrowed $10 from you 20 years ago, and for whatever reason, It may be legitimate, otherwise, he did not return it. And you still carry that in your mind after 20 years. When you were 10 years old, your uncle twisted your ears for the indisciplined, undesirable behavior that you committed. And after 20 years, you still carry an antipathy towards that uncle, benevolently twisted your ears to make you a better person. If you're still remembering those trivial things, then you have a bad memory. So knowledge doesn't necessarily mean that you remember all the information. If you remember all this information, fantastic. Nothing wrong with it. It's great. But not necessarily. You may remember a little bit, fraction of it. If that fraction of what you remember, if you are able to assimilate, digest it, assimilate it, and bring it down to your practice, that is true knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. It is not about how much of information that you remember. There's an interesting story, an episode in the life of Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, as you know, was the eldest of the Pandavas, of the 5 brothers. Yudhishthira, while they were learning in the Gurukulam, in ancient times, the schools are called Gurukulam. Gurukulam means the abode of a guru. And children were initiated and sent to a guru, and they learned Atma Vidya, the knowledge of the self. So Yudhishthira was in the Gurukulam, and after learning about 8 months of Shastras, the inspector came to examine how the students are learning. I'm talking inspector in today's context. Of course, those days there was no inspector. All right. But let us use that word for the purpose of understanding this. So the inspector came to examine how the students are learning. And one by one, he started from many other fellow disciples or students in the what do you call this, in the Gurukulam, in the ashram. And then the other 4 brothers were tested: Nagula, Sahadeva, Arjuna, Bhima, etc. And each one of them learned volumes. Some of them could recite the entire Vedas and Suktams and Upanishads. All those literature, they spelled it out. And when it came to Yudhishthira, the inspector asked Yudhishthira, now the eldest of the brother, Dharmaraja, what have you learned? And Yudhishthira was very, very confident, of course, but at the same time, a little bit embarrassed. And he told the master, I have only learned 2 sentences. And then when Yudhishthira said, I only have learned 2 sentences, the inspector got very angry. You mean to say, in these 8 months of your education here, you have only learned 2 sentences? Yes, master, he said. And that the master did not like. The master was so upset. He was embarrassed. In this institution, you only have learned 2 sentences in this 8 months. And he was so upset, he began to beat up the young Yudhishthira. Those days, corporal punishment was allowed. And because adequate, not too much of corporal punishment was used, children really grew up with certain values. But today, I don't know, corporal punishment is abolished. Of course, it may be the right thing to do because the teachers themselves don't have control over their anger. They abuse. They take on their frustration. They take off their frustration upon the children, and they abuse the children physically, which of course is wrong, no doubt. So the teacher started beating Yudhishthira. And when teacher started beating up Yudhishthira because of his offense of not learning enough, Yudhishthira stood there calm and composed, absolutely serene, and no reaction whatsoever. And when Yudhishthira stood there so calm and composed, despite the teacher beating him up, and the teacher knew that this boy is going to be the king in the near future, and I'm going to beat him up. And when the teacher started thinking, and he saw so calm and composed, and as he was thinking, his eyes fell on the book, the first sentence, what Yudhishthira learned. And the sentence read, never get angry. Never get angry. And when the teacher read that sentence, never get angry, he understood what Yudhishthira meant. When he said, I only learned 2 sentences, the first sentence was, never get angry. He never got angry. He was an epitome of serenity and peace, absolutely calm and composed. And then the teacher understood that he's really practicing what he learned. And then the teacher, the inspector rather, was so embarrassed. My God, me, despite my so many years of accumulating all this knowledge, I couldn't control my anger. Here is a young boy who learned, never got angry, and he's practicing it. And he was so embarrassed. And he went and hugged the young boy and apologized for his heinous expression, unpalatable behavior. And he profusely apologized. And then Yudhishthira told the inspector, no, master, I did get angry. I did get angry. I was irritated inside, but I did not show it. And as he expressed it, the inspector's eye fell on the second sentence. What did the second sentence say? The second sentence read, never speak a lie. Never speak a lie. By Yudhishthira confessing that he did get irritated a little bit inside, he's practicing the second sentence, never speak a lie. He could have hogged the teacher's attention. He could have amassed the appreciation from the teacher that he never got angry, but by confessing that I did feel a little bit of irritation inside, but I did not express it, by confessing that, he's practicing the second sentence, never speak a lie. Now that episode in the Mahabharata is describing what is true knowledge. It is not how many volumes of literatures, how many books that you read. Today, people have a tendency to keep buying books and loading their library. And they hardly read so much. And remember, if you really want to gain knowledge, there is a unique proportion, a unique ratio that is recommended. That is 20% reading and 80% reflection. Read less and reflect, assimilate, and practice more. And if you are able to bring about this proportion, you will never go wrong. 20% reading, 80% reflection. But today what happens is most people 99% reading, 1% reflection, if at all. They go on reading, cramming information and remembering if you can. That is not information. That is not true knowledge. That is jnanam, of course. But what really helps us to transform our life is vijnanam. Vijnanam means visheshena jnanam. That is special knowledge. Special knowledge means assimilated knowledge is wisdom. And that is what will help us to bring about a shift in the paradigm. If we don't bring about that wisdom, transform this knowledge into wisdom, what happens is it can be an impediment. Too much of knowledge can give us ego. Unnecessary accumulating information can develop an ego in you, and it'll make you believe that, oh, I know a lot. Remember, ego is an impediment in practicing this knowledge. ladies and gentlemen, an elephant. If an elephant is carrying a huge amount of weight, let's say fodder on its back, all right, and it becomes an impediment, it becomes a nuisance for the elephant, isn't it? But the same food is eaten by the elephant, and the same quantity is inside the stomach of the elephant. That food becomes a source of knowledge, source of energy. The food, if it is on its back, it becomes an impediment, but the same quantity of food, if it is in the stomach, digested, it's a source of energy for the elephants to move. In the same way, you can have a whole lot of information, lying in your brain, but not digested. It becomes an impediment. It becomes arrogance. In fact, it is this unnecessary accumulation of information that can lead to religious fanaticism. Religious fanaticism leads to religious quarrel. Yes, faith in your culture, following your culture with an idea of self-transformation, whichever culture, religion, faith you belong to, is perfect. Nothing wrong with that. You can choose your faith that you want. But when you choose a faith and fanatically attach to your faith or your God, and hurl insulting terms at other faith and religion, or hurling insult to the other religious believers and looking down upon them, that, if you think is knowledge, you got it wrong. That is rank ignorance. Whereas true knowledge develops Catholicity in us. True knowledge develops humility to respect the other faith and other religion and other followers. True knowledge develops a broad mind and a sharp intellect. True knowledge develops a broad mind, at the same time a sharp intellect to x-ray through and understand the problems and difficulties and challenges of life. That is what the wisdom does. Otherwise, it can develop religious fanaticism. Remember, fanaticism, no matter which religion, faith, race, or nationality one belongs to, religious fanaticism is an impediment. And how do we test? Are we fanatic? Very simple. What is our perspective towards the other religion? What is our opinion, our perspective towards other followers of other gods? If you looking down upon them, rest assured, your religious belief is nothing more than fanaticism. True knowledge make you follow your belief, your faith, your culture, no doubt, but that will develop a sense of reverence to everything, every follower, every faith. That is what the Indian tradition that taught Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, the world is one family. The world is one family, and modern times we call it global village. The entire universe, mineral kingdom, vegetable kingdom, animal kingdom, and human kingdom are so intelligently and intricately interconnected. All these four kingdoms are so intelligently, intricately interconnected. So we have a duty to look after the mineral kingdom, vegetable kingdom, animal kingdom, and we cannot look down upon them. That is wisdom. Once there were three boys. They worked on something and they got a certain amount of money. And they wanted to buy something with that money that they had. And it so happened that these three boys were from three different linguistic groups. These three boys happened to be from three linguistic groups. One was a Persian boy from Persia, which is today's Iran. And he spoke Persian. And the second one was an English boy from England. Third one was an Indian boy. These were three friends. They worked, got some money. And each one of them got in an argument. The Persian boy said, I want to buy Hinduana. And when English boy heard that, I don't want Hinduana, I want watermelon. And he was so adamant, I don't want anything else, I simply want watermelon. Persian boy was so adamant, I want Hinduana. And the Indian boy said, I don't want watermelon, I don't want Hinduana, I want tarboos. And they got into a bitter fight, bitter argument about what they want to do with the money. And it so happened, there was a passerby who knew all the three languages. He knew Persian, he knew English, he knew Hindi. And when he overheard the quibble and quarrel that these three boys were going through, he knew that there is a misunderstanding. And he approached these three boys and said, children, trust me, give me the money. I will give you exactly what you want. I promise you, I guarantee you, I will not run away with money. And the three boys looked at each other. Very hesitatingly, they surrendered the money to the man and said, okay, here's the money. Give us what I want. And he went across and came back after 10 minutes. And he brought a fruit. And he cut the fruit into 3 pieces. And he called the Persian boy, what do you want? Persian boy said, I want Hinduana. And he gave this fruit to the boy. And the boy was so happy, he got the fruit that he wanted. In Persian, watermelon is called Hinduana. And he called the English boy, what do you want? He said, I want watermelon. And he gave the second piece of the fruit to English boy. And he was overjoyed to receive the fruit. And he called the Indian boy, what do you want? I want tarboos. He gave the third piece to the Indian boy. And the Indian boy was so happy. Each one of them got what they want. Now, ladies and gentlemen, reflect. What was the reason for this conflict? What was the fundamental reason for the conflict? Sheer ignorance. Ignorance of what? It is the same fruit called watermelon. Persian boy called it Hinduana. English boy called it watermelon. Indian boy called it tarboos. The fruit being in the same, each one called in different names. The entire religious conflict in the world boils down to ignorance of the same supreme reality, which Hindus calls Brahman, Christians call Father in Heaven, Muslim calls Allah, but it is the same supreme reality that is all pervading. It this ignorance that causes the religious discrimination and conflict. So when we really understand this knowledge, that it is the same supreme reality that is all pervading, it is the soul of every religion, that is the true knowledge. That very moment, we begin to experience peace, we begin to experience serenity, we begin to experience, we are able to avoid the religious concept. Now, this religious discrimination is not only among inter-religions. In one religion itself, there is discrimination. Why? Among Hindus, among Indians, there are discrimination. The discrimination between Tamils, Telugu, Hindi-speaking people, Gujarati-speaking people. Why don't we understand we are descendants of the same culture? You may be speaking different languages. The Tamil Hindus believe Tamil is a religion. Tamil is simply a language. Yes, Tamil has a culture which is originated from Hinduism. Hindi-speaking people believe that the Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita is the only scriptures. So does the Gujarati-speaking people. So does the Telugu-speaking people. We are descendants of the same culture. We could be speaking different languages. Why this discrimination among one culture itself? That is sheer ignorance. The more we emphasize upon these discrimination, the more it is harmful to your own culture. Yes, we can promote our language. Promoting language is important. Language and culture are the warp and the woof of a cloth. If you hold a cloth in front of you, there is thread running horizontal and thread running vertical, right? Horizontal thread is called warp, vertical thread is called woof. Similarly, language and culture are so intricately interlinked. We got to promote the language, but not the discrimination and say that person is a particular linguistic group, and on that base we bring about discrimination. That, ladies and gentlemen, is rank ignorance. We got to overcome that. So when you gain the real knowledge, what happens is you gain that power within. You rise above everything else. We rise above pettiness, and the result is that we experience a deep sense of serenity, peace, happiness, better relationship, better productivity, prosperity, and everything that we want. That Bhagavan Krishna says in the very last verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, wherever there is Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha, where there is Arjuna, who the wielder of weapon. Yatta Sri, there is prosperity, there is success, there is serenity, there is everything that we want. Where there is spirituality, where there is dynamic action, that combination of spiritual values and worldly knowledge, that beautiful combination, that delicate balance will give us what we are seeking. That brings us the conclusion of the discourse on the vision of Bhagavad Gita. Tomorrow, I will be speaking on the purpose of avatar. What is the purpose of avatar as espoused in the Bhagavad Gita? Why there is avatar? There said to be, there is about 9 avatars of Vishnu, and the last being Buddha avatar, and before that was Krishna avatar. And today is the actual birthday of Krishna. So in the process of greeting Krishna for his birthday, let us all greet ourselves to bring about the birth of Krishna within each one of us. But for the political, to be technically correct, we celebrate Krishna Janmashtami tomorrow in South Africa. All right. But whether we celebrate today or tomorrow, what matters is with what bhavana, with what attitude, with what intention we celebrate Krishna Janmashtami. So let us discuss tomorrow what is the purpose of avatar. That will be from 7 to 8 tomorrow, same place, same time. We'll conclude with the Shanti part. Om Purnamada Purnamitam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamataya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Please don't go away. Just wait a minute to conclude the announcement, please.
Greetings once again to all. First and foremost, our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to Sri M.K. Angajan Ji for once again imparting and sharing with us the priceless teachings, life lessons, and ideals from the Bhagavad Gita. May you continue your sterling work for years to come. A humble request is made to subscribe to and follow us on other social media platforms. On YouTube, remember to please click on the bell icon so that you have access to other discourses and motivational videos. As our previous MCs have mentioned, Angajan Ji is the author of 2 books and has compiled a number of audio CDs and DVDs. These items are available for purchase either via the Life Mastery Foundation website, which is www.lifemastery.vision, or by contacting the foundation directly. The foundation, being a PBO, is reliant on public donations in order to conduct its various programs worldwide. Should you wish to make a donation, please do so via the website or contact the foundation directly for their banking details. Also note that all donations are tax deductible. Thank you to devotees of the Amshlanga Hindu Society, Gujarati Hindu Sanskriti Kendra, Sri Gopala Hindu Temple in Verulam, and Vishwarup Temple and Dharmashala in Tongat. We thank you all for joining us throughout the week and wish you a blessed and joyous Krishna Janmashtami. May the knowledge that you have gained be the catalyst in your journey of self-discovery. Stay blessed and stay safe. Hari Om.